You may notice that we have a slightly different look and feel to tonight's stream. We are in a different location. We are a few miles away from my usual digs. So that I could have the privilege in person to have you and the world famous Jason Burns to join me. For those who know him, what is your stream? I can't remember now. Something Africa.
Zwimmer 100 Africa Without Borders.
Africa Without Borders. And for those who know Africa Without Borders, there's been a lot of content there, great content. And he has been very kind enough to free himself from doing the many videos he's doing himself to join me. And he was certainly very keen to join me because of the topic. It's like one of those topics that really does bring attention to a lot of people. We've had, certainly over the years, both Jason and I, some very interesting challenges and statements and claims by Muslims on this whole topic, and that is the differences in the Quran. Why this is such a hot topic is because it goes completely against what pretty much every Muslim tells you. And that is there's only one Quran, fully preserved, with no contradictions, no differences, word for word, dot for dot. And that's the slogan that pretty much every Muslim will tell you. And there's a good reason why they tell you, because in the Quran itself, it does kind of support that claim. It talks about that the Quran is perfectly preserved. It is fully detailed, fully explained. It's the word of God. Muslims will tell you that it was direct revelation through Angel Gabriel to Muhammad, word for word, worked its way through to eventually appear in what we call the Quran today. But of course, that little bit of a journey isn't quite what you think or what you may have been told. It's like this amazing accuracy of the translation from the original revelation to what we see as the Quran today. And we're going to unpack that because we're going to go back in time, not literally, of course, but we're going to go back in time in history to have a look at some of the kind of details that were back in the day. You know, when we go back those years, because obviously this was 7th century, we're going to look at some very interesting. Well, I say look at. We're going to go through some documentation. Unfortunately, I can't share that with you at the moment. But what I will do is I will provide some documents to back up what we're going to go through. And we'll add that to the stream later on. We just got some technical problems where we couldn't get the files added into the stream for now. But what we will do is at least go through step by step what is the case that we have, which is basically to say there isn't just one Quran. There are many Qurans, and not just there are many Qurans, but in these many Qurans, there are many differences. Differences that are significant, and we'll go through the detail as we unpack this. So let's start by looking at the claims themselves. I will quote to you the verses. So Surah 5, verse 3, "This day I have perfected for you your religion, completed my favor upon you, and I have chosen you, Islam, as your religion." So you got there this perfected religion. So it therefore wouldn't be a religion that's with error. You shouldn't expect there to be anything in error because of that claim. Surah 482 says, "Then do they not reflect upon the Quran? If it had been from any other than Allah, they would find many contradictions." So in other words, because it is from Allah, as they claim, you won't find contradictions. Surah 11, verse 1, "A book whose verses are perfected." And this is where it really makes it clear, and they are detailed. So if God is going to perfect his book, as in the Quran, you're not going to expect to see any errors. You're not going to expect to see contradictions. And more importantly, in our particular subject matter tonight is you're not going to see differences. And what do I mean by differences? Differences with the source material. So a way of proving that is that the fact there are many Qurans. Now, Muslims would agree and scholars would agree that there are many Qurans. The main reason there are many Qurans was to accommodate the various different dialects. So, depending on which part of the world you're from, the form of Arabic that was spoken will have its variances. And we get that. I mean, it's the same with most languages, English, French, German, whatever, depending which part of the country you are, there are some variances. I mean, Jason's a little further away from me, so we have a slight pronunciation dialect difference, compared to how you say certain words up here versus what I say down south. So we appreciate that. And those differences aren't what I would call differences. And we're not saying for 1 second that's a difference. It's just a pronunciation, dialogue, variation. And what I mean by that is it doesn't change the word. It doesn't change the meaning. You could have a different word that is actually acceptable as long as that other word has exactly the same meaning, and it could be in certain countries or parts of the world where, for whatever reason, a different word was used. Could be a custom thing, who knows? But it shouldn't be a word that has a completely different meaning where it changes the verse, which means if it's a perfected Quran, both those meanings cannot be true, because especially if they're in contradiction to each other, or they clearly are very different statements. It's one or it's the other. And that's where we're going with this. We're not saying anything about dialects. We're not saying about pronunciation. We appreciate that there are these arufs. What's that other term they use?
Correct.
Correct. Thank you very much. Correct. That's why I got Jason here for me to help me out. The Karats, which is talking about, is it the 10 Karats, 7 Karats, 10 arufs?
10 Karat, 7 Aruf.
Okay, brilliant. So, and variations thereof. So apparently
there's more variations of that.
Yeah, it's like a blend, depending. It's a bit like going to the shop with your sweets. You've got 10 different sweets in 7 different counters, but there's all a bit of pick and mix going on, and you end up with a variation which only uses one of those 7 arufs or 10 of those karats. I'll get that word at one point tonight before it finishes. So what I'm saying is that's okay. Those are the variations we agree with. And we can go through history all day long. In fact, you were on a great stream the other day, wasn't you? You were talking to a Muslim and putting that case forward, saying, as much as I appreciate you can talk about these variances and differences in terms of pronunciation, dialects, what have you, the point is this: dialects and pronouncing do not change meaning. They do not change the statement for what it's intending to say. For example, I can't say I'm going west and another book is saying I'm going east. You can't say that's a pronunciation difference. That's clearly because you're never going to meet, because if you go west and he goes east, you guys are going a very different way, a very different direction. So it's that black and white is what we're talking about. Clear differences that cannot be explained based on karats and arufs. So let's see if we've got a few more verses here. Surah 6:114, I do like this one. Shall I seek a judge over you, God, when he is the one who revealed this book, explained in detail? So it's perfected, it's detailed. And then in Surah 2:2, that this book is in no doubt is from Allah. So it's from Allah, it's his words, he's revealed it, there's no question it's perfected. You therefore can't expect to see. So the case is, based on Allah himself, as per what the Quran is saying, we should not expect to see the different Qurans we have with differences that are more significant than pronunciation or dialect. So to start this investigation, if you like, we're going to be like a couple of investigators on the case. Is the claim has been made, there's no differences. So let's see if that's the case. Now, one of the claims, which is a little bit of an interesting one, and I don't really see the point that's being made here, and Jason, by me, jump in when you feel to, It's this thing about oral tradition. What are they trying to claim about oral tradition, Jason?
They're trying to say that people heard Muhammad say things, that they had witnesses of that, and then that witness that said they saw Muhammad was passed on to someone else, and then it was passed on to someone else, and was passed on to someone else, and so they're saying that with the Quran, that it was all heard what Muhammad was saying, and then it was passed on, and that's the main thing for them. Is the Quran is a recitation. So for them, it's a big thing that the Quran is the word of God because it's been recited and passed on
Nice.
orally.
Yeah. And here's the interesting bit, why I personally think this is just nonsense in a way as a claim, not there's anything wrong with that actual tradition, is if it was true, then what would we need to look at? Well, one of the obvious facts is it didn't just stay as an oral tradition, did it? Because it wasn't that long when they decided, well, let's be sensible here, especially when they were in wars and people getting killed and one thing and the other. Well, you need to write this down. And they spotted that quite early on. So no surprise, they've written it down. And this is where it's important. If the oral tradition is that reliable, which also goes with the claim that apparently these scholars or whatever you call it, you can go in out of Saudi Arabia or wherever and they can recite the Quran perfectly, dot for dot, word for word, etc., etc. That means they will be able to ensure the written version should also be just as accurate because they've got the ability to recite it to be sure what it is. So why can't they then write it down because it has been written down? You know, there are Arabic Qurans all around the world to make sure that it's just as accurate as the old edition. They've got no room to say, well, I don't know why somehow the written version isn't as accurate as the oral, because the oral is still, they say, intact. People can still recite it. We have that tradition. It's passed down all the way through so that even today we have the old tradition still in place that allows somebody, even if all the Qurans were burnt, they could simply resurrect the Quran by reciting it. You get one of these reciters and he could recite the Quran and they could reproduce the book accurately, word for word. So therefore, you can't say or make a claim based on the old tradition and ignore the written, because the written is simply a reflection or a copy of whatever that old tradition would be. Why would they want to write down a version that doesn't agree with the old? Because then they're going to therefore mislead, and especially when the Quran itself is putting Allah on the what's the word, on the jury stand to say, what do you claim about your Quran? It's perfect. It's God's word. It's perfected. So you therefore would expect that, this is the key bit here, that Muslims would make sure that they're being honourable and with integrity to honour Allah's words, to make sure that what has been passed down, which is claimed to be Allah's words, is what you then find in the Quran. That way, the claim of Allah will be successful. It will be reproduced, especially when Allah's claim even says his book. So he's not even talking directly about the old edition, which is all fine and dandy, but he's even referring to the book. So therefore we know that there's no reason whatsoever that a Quran should be anything but accurate, perfectly preserved, based on those claims. And that's where we're going to have the challenge, because we're going to show you that this is simply not true. There are variances, there are differences that are definitely not down to pronunciation, dialect, or whatever. It is far more significant. And like we said, and there were these basic, so giving you a little bit of history, like what Jason was saying there, that these pronunciations were coming from a source of the companions. So maybe you can unpack that better, because I remember you telling me a few things last night were really interesting on how the kind of origin from what Muhammad originally received to how it then got.
Well, They say first of all it was recitation, but it was
Mm.
also written on sticks, stones, and bones
Right.
first, and then the there was a certain battle, like you mentioned,
Mm.
and because people got killed, they were concerned that the Quran, from memorization, would be lost. So they decided to collect the Quran from these sticks, stones, and bones and make a recension. But then they have this recitation. They had key people that like Hafs, a guy who's known as Hafs, and he was a main reciter. And
Mm.
so one school of the Quran comes from the Hafs, so he passed it on and passed it on.
Mm.
And then there was another school, the Warsh, and they passed it on and passed it on. So you
Right.
have these different streams of, but the reason why there are different streams of this, they claim it's different dialects,
Mm.
is because Uthman um, was told that people are arguing because when they're reading the Quran, they're getting different understandings.
Yeah.
And so he had to make a recension, like a final Quran. But then they have this teaching to cover their back that there are these differences, that there was these different schools that Muhammad had revealed to him 7 ways of pronouncing the Quran.
Yeah.
And these 7 ways, you then have the Qurat, and the Qurat is the interpretation of the 7 ways of pronouncing the Quran.
Gotcha.
And some schools say they have the 7 aruf, the 7 ways.
Mm.
Some schools say we only have one.
Mm.
But the Qurat is the creative bringing together these different interpretations. So it's like they're saying you've got Liverpudlian, Mancunian,
Yeah.
Leeds.
Yeah.
Those are the haruf.
Right.
And then the Qurat is mixing the Mancunian with the Leeds language, and they get a Qurat, and that's how
Ah,
they say
right.
it. But the
Right.
reality is,
Mm.
there's 7 different Qurans and 10 different Qurans,
Yeah.
all this mixing, because
Yeah.
as you're going to show, it's not a case of Mancunian and Leeds. It's completely different words. Like one going south, the verse says,
Mm.
the wash says going south, and then the Hafs will go say east in the same
Mm.
verse,
Yeah.
different wording.
Yeah.
It's not about Leeds and Liverpudlian
No. No.
dialect.
Indeed.
I don't know if that's helpful.
That's
Or,
fantastic. More than helpful. So he's doing my job here. So I was about to say stuff, but he's already mentioned it, and with some extra detail. So this whole thing about the methodology, and how they recorded it, is part of the, if you like, validation of exactly what actually took place. Now I want to just unpack slightly a bit this about the wash and the halves. So these are basically the authorized readers, if you like, but they were based on appointments. So there are these things called the Nafi, and excuse me if I've pronounced that wrong, which is from Medina. Some of these names you might know. Ibn Kafir is a name that pops up a lot. Abu Amar Allah, Ibn Amar, slightly different, just Imar Amar, so it's just from a different region, has a similar name. Hamza, not the Hamza we know, fortunately, another Hamza. Al Kisai, and I apologize for the butchering of the language. Abu Bakr, Asim. Now, these are all people that are all recorded in the Encyclopedia of Islam, being where they were the ones that were the initiators of getting things together based on those readings. So they were the, if you like, the initiators, the appointed, authorized Muslims that were basically given this job to compile and bring together these readings based on what Jason said in terms of washing, so forth. So that's just one extra layer that then brings forward these readings. And this was based on, just to really be precise here, based on, like Jason also said, so I'm just going to be copying what he's saying in a minute, is it was based on recitation or recitation, depending on how you want to say that.
yeah.
So that is where the oral tradition does come in. So basically what that means is there is, and I totally get this is absolutely fine, there was a form of, okay, you guys go out, you pull all those guys who've recited the Quran, and you're going to now, with the names that I've quoted there, these were the ones quoted in the Encyclopedia of Islam to say that they were the ones that then helped to get those recitations into a reading. And there were different readings depending on exactly how Jason said, depending on that route. So there was a route that was the Hafs reading, and that was very independent of the wash. There were different individuals working through the different reader, and those readers were then, without saying too much too soon, but ending up with the different Qurans as we know. And if you ever go out, into Arabia or wherever, or even you can obviously still in the UK get hold of these, you will see that, I don't exactly know how it says it on the Quran, but it says, so if it's a Hafs Quran, how does it actually say it's a Hafs Quran? Does it say the Quran by Hasha? How does the word Hafs get in there?
I can't remember what it's.
But it's somewhere referenced in. So you could pick up if you've got a Hafs Quran.
It will say
it will say so. It will say somewhere in the Quran that it's a Hafs. It's the Hafs reading, or whichever way it says. Now I had an argument with, can you believe it, with a Muslim on a debate saying it's not a version. Now, of course, that's nitpicking semantics about what I call it. All I'm saying is there is a Hafs Quran, there is a wash Quran. When you get the Hafs Quran, it actually does say it's Hafs. Hafs being the reading. Now, which is kind of what they sometimes call the recitation, because it is an oral tradition of reciting the Quran to then write it down, and it's that recitation that becomes the Hafs version. So it's the Hafs in that sense is what I'm talking about. So we are talking the same thing. We're on the same page, and that is one of the number of readings based on how the oral tradition took place. Based on these guys, these were the original guys.
Could I just say something?
Absolutely, of course.
Some of you might be listening, and because a lot of this information that we're saying is the Muslim perspective, and it's quite complex in many. It's simple, but it's complex. And you might be wondering, well, what's the cash value of all this? What Ray's trying to do? He's trying to get to the end game, and he's going to show you that actually there are different Qurans, totally different. They're not exactly the same. There's not one Quran. There are different Qurans. But what he's got to do to show you that, he's got to show you the Muslim mindset, their way of thinking, before he can show you that, and then he can break it down for you. So bear with him, because the end game will give you the resources, but we have to do this. It's like going into a bush full of weeds, and he has to clear the weeds so that you can understand his argument of why the Quran are different Quran. There's different Qurans. So just bear with him, because there's a lot of information that when we're presenting this, it's so difficult because they make it so complicated. But it's once we break it down, there's some cash value for you in it.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I appreciate that. So yeah, please bear with us. So just to qualify this precisely, so the people I was talking about are what we call the readers. So these were the people that would take the original oral tradition. They would be what we call the readers. And this is not me saying it. This is Islamic literature. This is Islamic definitions of how this all took place. And they would agree, yes, if they were readers, there's one called the Nafi, the Ibn Kathir, and all those names they quoted, they are the original readers. So what happens is that once they have had that recitation of the reading of the Quran, let's go to pick an example called the wash. Now, the wash is then what they call the transmission of the Quran. Now, the reason why I'm saying transmission, just to be precise, is because the wash had a very specific destination. So at that time, it wasn't just written, because as you think about it, if it was like in one specific area, let's take, for example, Saudi Arabia, there wouldn't be a need to have many different Qurans in one spot. The main purpose of this is because it needed to go to many different destinations, many different countries. The wash specifically was transmitted to the locations of Algeria, Morocco, and then it also went to Western Africa and Sudan at later stages. So there was basically the purpose of the transmission is to get the Qurans to as many countries, as many destinations as possible. And so this is why we had these readers that were given the responsibilities to say, with your version, with your transmission recitation, to say in this case it would be the transmission of the washed Quran. That then washed Quran was then going and sent out as the washed Quran to those countries. Then you've got the Algeria. Again, that went to specific types of countries. Not that it really matters where it goes, but that's kind of the methodology or the reason behind it. Is because they needed to distribute these Qurans to as many Muslim or countries where there were Muslims at the time. Some of them were just generally written, and it could be based on different dates, of course, because these weren't all done at the same time. This documentation will be provided in terms of the detail. I'll put the references in after the video to show you the exact dates of when each of these different readers did their recitations, then put these readings together to then be transmitted. They weren't all done at the same time, so there was a bit of a timing difference as well. So in some cases, yes, maybe one of the readings that was transmitted went to the same country as another, but it just went at different times. Whatever the reason was, all we're showing you is they exist. And these are what you have in your universities and colleges and what have you, where you have your records that have been recorded with these different readings, with these transmissions from these sources, and I'm just simply quoting you these sources. So this isn't my guesswork or my view of it. I'm just quoting you the Islamic sources that any credible scholar would agree to. So, moving on. This is where it gets interesting. So, what we then would do is to say, like Jason mentioned there, is where it really matters is when we make comparisons. So, it does get a bit confusing as well, but basically what we're saying here is depending on which transmitted Quran, whether it's Wash, Hafs, Al-Juri, or whatever, we are saying by looking at specific verses, there are many, many cases where the words are actually different. In other words, I mean, the Arabic word, more importantly, is different. It's not the same Arabic word. Now, one of the challenges, of course, with this, just to give you a bit of a backdrop, is because the original Arabic wasn't with diacritical marks and vowels. This came later. So part of the challenge is when they put together the Qurans, this is where some of the struggles they had to make it accurate is making sure, and we had the same issue with the Bible. You know, when it came to the Hebrew, the original Hebrew didn't come with vowels either. So it had the same challenge. So, but the important point is that if they were very diligent about being accurate with their insertion of the vowels and making sure their integrity of the right words have been kept, then we know that the translated meaning of those words should be the same. And you can definitely have variations, like we said, that's the diacritical differences and pronunciation differences, which you will get. That's fine, as long as it is the same meaning or same word that is conveyed. And that's where we're going to look at. It's where we don't have that simple difference, we have it more significant. So, moving on. So I can't show you this, but there was basically two examples of two Qurans, and I will provide these details later. Oops, nearly lost my page. Is where you will see that in one Quran there are extra words, the graphical lettering differences, the diacritical differences, vowel differences, and something called the Bumala difference. I don't even know what that is, but these are the actual differences that has been found between making those comparisons. So the way that we look at to see these differences is we need to go back to those sources, and those sources is what we call the manuscripts. So we go to the manuscripts, the actual manuscripts that we have, and we can see that there are definitely different recitation systems going on, which is the Qurats, and we appreciate that. These kind of differences provide some what we call textual variances. But what we are saying is there's more to it. There's even cases where there are omissions, word substitutions, or different word verse orders, which can change the whole context of the sentence. So, and that's comparing the different editions. We're looking at the Sanya manuscript that was discovered in 1972. It seems I just lost myself there. Where are we gone? Bear with me. No technical issue there. Oopsie. Right, back on. Okay, not sure what happened there.
Not missed by accident.
All right. So yeah, the Sanya manuscript, which is, if you want to know, that's in the Library of Yemen, was discovered in 1972, and it's one of the oldest fragments. The C1 palimpsest contains erased versions and differences in the current Quran. So this is really, really interesting. So this is where we're seeing, apart from we're going to see word differences, we're actually talking about the compilation based on the manuscripts themselves. So as you said, it had erased verses. So what that means is in the current Quran, you have verses that don't exist in some of the old original manuscripts, in this case, the one that we're talking about here. And it's saying that certain verses were erased. There's also one called the Samarkand and Kufic Quran, dated around 765. This manuscript contains significant textual differences compared to later standardized versions like the Istanbul Quran. The next one, of course, you can go to these places, of course, to check this out. The Birmingham manuscript, while often cited as evidence of early preservation, according to academics, it shows that there were differences based on which reading of the Qira they followed. While many Muslims view these as merely pronunciation differences, they often involve different consonants and vowels that change the meaning. And this is where we're talking about. The differences is not just on vowel pronunciation, but in cases where it changes the meaning. If it changes the meaning, it's not the same. It's not the same.
Can I just say that the
Please do.
Birmingham manuscript, it's only like a couple of pages.
Yeah.
So they bang on about how fantastic it is.
All right.
It's like 2 or 3 pages, you know.
Yeah.
And the Sana manuscript, there's been a lot of research done on that, and you can just Google it and find out. If you if you put it under ultraviolet light, you can see an older Quran underneath.
Oh wow.
And when you compare the two, the one underneath and the one on top, they are different Qurans. That's the Sana manuscript.
Brilliant. So the Hafs version is probably the standard of most in the world, and then the Wash has thousands of minor variances, such as "you shall take" versus "they have taken," and this is Quran 2 verse 125. So "you shall take" versus "they" is clearly different, because "you" is a single person, "they" is a multiple of people. It can't be one or the other. It's got to be one or the other. It can't be both. So that's a clear difference.
Can I just say one more thing? Is
Yeah.
the thing what is absolutely key here is all that stuff that we had to go through, that complicated stuff about that Aruf and the Quran to try and help you to understand the way a Muslim's thinking. When you talk to some Muslims, they will come up with all this stuff and it's dead complicated. But what Ray is doing is showing you a very simple, very easy way to cut through all that nonsense. And it's simple. As you look at the text itself, the wash text and the Dori and the Hafs, they're not different different like dialects. They're completely different words. And so he's cutting through all that nonsense and giving you a simple way of talking to a Muslim and say, well, let's look at the Dori and the Hafs. You're saying it's a different dialect, but how come it says they and
You.
you? How come it says I and then we?
Mm.
How come there's a verse missing in that one and it's in there?
Mm.
And that's what he's trying to show you, that once you get to the reality of looking at the text of these so-called oral traditions,
Mm.
it falls down. There are different wordings, different sentences sometimes.
Thank you for that. And what that's also saying, that's a great point, is the old edition could not have been perfect. And let's think about that. Does
Mm,
that
mm.
actually make sense? Yes, it does, because an old edition is going to be suspect. If we're going to rely purely on memory as humans, you know what we're
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
you know, that's to
But
me.
isn't there verses in the Quran where it says
Mm,
that Allah will help him to Muhammad to forget?
that's true.
Yeah, so there's
Yeah.
verses in the Quran that says Allah would forget, and there's hadith Muhammad
Mm,
would forget, and there's hadith stories of Muhammad where he forgot a verse and then his companions had to remind him. So if the founder had a bad
mm,
memory, it's not going to go well for his companions.
no. So somebody did a very good study, and I'm glad it wasn't me because this must have taken a few hours. So those 10 accepted readings that we're talking about, so the Wash, the Hafs, the Algerian, and the others, basically there are 10. And these are 10 that no scholar would deny are the accepted
Mm.
readings and transmissions of the Quran. No scholar is going to disagree. The only difference is they're going to say they are the same. The wordings and meanings are the same. So, a scholar called Mohammed Fahed Karun, and I apologize for the pronunciation, he had published the editions of the Quran and he had listed variants from all these 10 canonical readings within the margins, totaling of showing those differences and variances, only around 4,000 accepted variances. And I like the word accepted variances. What it means is they have been qualified as clearly being a variance. So there's no argument. Get this guy. I mean, I will put all this detail in the references for you so you can look this up. So we're not being in any way mischievous or sly
Mm.
here. We're going to be very open, very honest. We'll provide the documentation to provide the evidence that there are recorded these variances. And all you need to do is get your Qurans, your Wash and Hafs and Jury, whatever, and you can look them up and you can check for yourself and see the variances we're talking about. Another good one is Kitab al-Masif, a book on manuscripts, an early Islamic work done by Ibn Abi Dawood. And these documents, again, show the differences between the personal codices of the Prophet's companions. Now, this is where it gets interesting. In the personal copies of the companions, it's a bit more than just differences. Have a guess what else it is, Jason?
In the manuscripts.
Yeah.
What do you mean, like differences in the text?
So there were personal companions that had their own set.
Oh yeah, I would say actually missing chapters.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Exactly right. So you've got some cases where it's 114. I'm so glad you said that. put him on the spot there.
Ibn Masud and
Yep.
people like that.
Perfect. Guy knows his stuff. So yes, there were 100, which we know standardized versions. We know today it's 114 chapters, but back in the day with the different personal companions, 116 chapters, 111 chapters, and this is all recorded. This is all known stuff. So if you want to talk about differences, then what happened to at least 2 chapters? That seems to have.
Do you know how they tried to get around it?
Do tell.
They say it was part of the Aruf, and it's been abrogated.
Oh my!
That's how they get around it.
That's hilarious. So speaking of some more scholars, more up-to-date scholars, modern scholars.
Will we have access to this? Do we get access to
Yes.
this? Yeah. Oh,
Yes,
great.
yes.
Because I'd
So-
love to have a copy of this, to be honest.
Yeah, I'll forward you, and then the key references I'll put in the
Thanks, yeah.
the description after because we've had some few technical problems. So my PC just died on me. I didn't bring my charger with me. Battery was 96%. Oh, this will last 4 days or whatever. and then about 45 minutes later, it was on 0%. So I'm not sure what happened there, but fortunately, I got it to salvage, but unfortunately, couldn't get the file transferred in time. So I'm reading it off my phone for now. So that's why I'm looking down a bit. But we will definitely provide this for you, and I'll certainly email you a copy of it, because this is some brilliant work, and this has taken a lot of research that people have compiled this together. So a big thank you for those who have put all this information together. Dr. Shadi Nasir, an academic who explores the history of Quran's transmissions and argued that the text was not 100% preserved in a single unchanging form.
Wow, that's interesting, bro. Yeah.
We know of some people, don't we? Hasan Tash and Jay Smith. I remember the time they went to Speaker's Corner in the UK, for those who are not familiar with Speaker's Corner.
Yeah.
38 different Qurans. And of course, the issues. Oh, wow. There we go. We're back. Right. The gremlins are doing everything to stop this working. We're not going to let them get away with this. This is too important. So, Hadan Tash, part of a very, very good ministry on looking at Islam, looking at the history of Islam. Jay Smith has been way over 20 years doing research on Islamic studies. And again, he came up with, in this case, 31 different Qurans, all with highlighting all the textual differences. Then we've got standard Islamic sources like Sahih al-Bukhari, that's a hadith collection, record that early Muslims fought over the different versions of the Quran. So this is in hadiths. This is Sahih, authentic hadiths, leading to the Caliph Uthman to standardize this. Now, this is a little bit of an interesting story. I think you know this one, Jason. Do you want to just roll out what happened? What did Uthman get involved in? What did he do? And why did he do it?
With Uthman. Uthman was a caliph, and there was arguments about different ways of pronouncing the Quran. This is the way they say it.
Yeah.
And so it was pointed out to him that, there needs to be a standardized Quran. There was already supposedly one done before that by Abu Bakr, but apparently this wasn't done properly because they had to do it again. And the idea was to make a standardized Quran where there wouldn't be any arguments about what the Quran was, which it all doesn't make sense. And then he had all the other Qurans burnt, but he didn't use some of Muhammad's main reciters, like Ibn Masud. He didn't use him, and ignored his Quran, which had in it. Then yeah, and so they made this standardized. They had a committee, or so they said they had a committee, and they made this standardized Quran. So the Uthmanic Quran is really behind all these other Qurans in a way, really. So yeah, that's what the history is, so-called history.
Yes. So of course that definitely questions then the ability to preserve the Quran accurately. So So another little issue, and I know this guy's name. So in December 2023, there seemed to have been a lot of chaos around Muslim ranks. After a few years after Yasser Qadhi. So he provided, his concerns about the variances, and this caused a real rift between the Muslim scholars. and it really did cause a lot of extra issues. Now I'm going to go through some examples here now of the different Arabic versions. So, extra words. The Quran, according to Hafs, Allah is self-sufficient. In according to the Wash, this is Surah 57, verse 24. For some bizarre reason in the Wash, it's one verse left before, so there could be a verse missing or something, but that's 57, verse 23, but it's the same verse. But that says Allah, the self-sufficient. So the word is has just disappeared in the Wash. So there's a word just not in one version and not in the other. Another example, 3 verse 133, and hastens to, and in the one it just hastens to. So the and is again not there. So it's not an identical Quran. There are words that are in one Quran that's not in another. 2 verse 132, and Ibrahim enjoyed on his sons, and in the other version, and Ibrahim instructed his sons. So we got enjoined on his sons versus instructed his sons. So
two different words there.
Very different words, isn't it? Absolutely. Leave that one out. I can't see what the problem is in that one. Okay, verse 21, verse 4. Because these are thousands, we're only going to give you a sample set of these. So 21, verse 4 says, he said, my love knows. My Lord
knows.
Yeah. My Lord knows. Well, the other one says, say, my Lord knows. So the word say is versus he said. So he said and say are clearly different. Not a pronunciation thing. And one more, 91:15, and for him is no fear, and the other, therefore for him there's no fear. So the word therefore is found in the second Quran, but not in the first one we mentioned. So clear wording differences. Now we're looking diacritical differences. Now, like I said, these diacritical differences are not what you think. So we're going to do the Hafs first and then the Wash second every time, just so you know the order. So we'll start with 258. Now, this is meant to be purely a dialectical difference, so pronunciation type difference. So start with Hafs, Surah 258. We give mercy, and in the Wash, it's he gives mercy. Now, I don't know about you, Jason, but we and he.
Yeah, and even if you go into the Arabic, like look at all the dictionaries, you can't get around it. All the dictionaries say we is different than he.
Yes.
All the Arabic dictionaries.
That's right.
I checked it.
Very good. 2149, same sort of thing. It's you in the first one, and then the second one in the Wash, it's they.
Yeah.
You and they, there's no way that ever is the same. This is an interesting one, slightly a different kind of connotation here. In the Hafs, it says, we shall raise up, and then the Wash, we shall make alive. Not sure how that happened, but that's quite a difference in wording there. And then again, another, I gave you, we gave you, 3 verse 80. He and we and 4, 152 as well.
Yeah, that's an added word, slaves.
Now, this is a very good one because this isn't obvious. So, a word difference here in the Hafs, it says, they are slaves of the most gracious. And the Wash, it says, they are with the most gracious. So to say you are slaves of the most gracious and say you're just with the most gracious, it's clearly two different things. Because if it is purely pronunciation, I don't know about you, but I don't think I could ever say slaves and accidentally say with instead. They're just so distinctively different. Now, let me just say, this was based on diacritical marks. So let me just explain that a little bit better. The reason why this is significant is that when you look at the Arabic, and it is one of the challenges with Arabic, if you ever looked at Arabic, there's a lot of markings compared to most languages, isn't it? Like you look at lots of dots and dashes all over the lettering. And the problem with this is that when you're writing down these Arabic words, it doesn't take much to have a slip of the pen or whatever and put the marking in the wrong place. But the problem with that is that different marking is actually a different word, because you can have very similar words that just have markings differences that actually change the word. Now, if it was perfect, this is my point. If it was perfect, like Allah claimed, and he said he preserved his word and it was perfect, then he would have made sure that this error would not have ever found its way in the Quran. It would have been okay, and this is the critical bit here, if the oral tradition translated and he knew what that word is, he knew what he was writing down. I would like to think there would be some scribes or whatever to do some checks, to double check that what is written down is correct. Because if you're going to rely on one guy who's just hearing what's being said and writing it down, and maybe he's writing down rather a lot of words, maybe a couple of thousand or whatever, I would say there's a risk of him making a mistake. So if Allah is going to ensure that it's perfect, then I'm sure Allah would have been involved in this process to make sure that this kind of mistake didn't end up in the Quran. And we have that same thing with the Bible, don't we? So we've got some very good sort of methodology, don't we, to ensure these kind of mistakes are not made, don't we?
Yeah, in what sense?
So that, when we look at the Bible, when we look at the wordings, you won't, where it's a particular Hebrew word or Greek word, we don't see those kind of variances where it's completely a different word because of an error. Whoever compiled that made sure that they got that word right. The translation's a different ballgame, but some of the original words we don't have that, I don't know, I'm not aware of, where you have a very different Greek word for the same found in any manuscript. The manuscripts are very accurate, aren't they?
Yeah. It's a bit textual variance. I know what you're saying, but I think that's quite a deep topic because there are slips of the pen where they might miss a kind of word. Say just for argument's sake, an F.
Yeah.
And it's not because of the actual Greek or Hebrew. It's the fact that they're doing it by candlelight.
Right.
And then it comes to be a different word.
Yeah.
Type thing.
So what I mean is that through time, that's all been corrected. So that's the scholarly work has been done to ensure that it's got the right word. So when you go to look at the Greek, the interlinear, or whatever, you look at these Greek words, yes, you look at some manuscripts, you will see these variances, but they have been addressed. But there's never been a claim to say that all the manuscripts were perfectly preserved.
I think that's the key, though. With us, we're saying that.
Yeah, we're honest.
We're saying that we're happy with textual variance because we're saying that a scribe is not God.
Yes.
They're going to make mistakes. The difference with them is they're saying their recitations of these, which come into these books, they are from God.
Yes.
So when you point out there are these textual variants, it doesn't make sense because they're saying these textual variants are from God, but we're showing that it's bigger than just pronunciation. It's thinking. But for us, we have so many manuscripts, and we're honest with our textual variants. And like if you go back to the rabbis, they would, if they made one mistake, a rabbi made one mistake, they had to write the manuscript again.
Yeah.
So that's how careful the Jews were in copying. And for the Christians, we have so many different manuscripts that we're honest about it. So if we have 5,000 manuscripts and one manuscript has got the wrong word, we have 4,800 or whatever, 900 to correct it.
Yeah.
So we have all that resource. We're happy with that. Whereas they are just trying to bamboozle us with all that Aruf stuff.
Yes.
And you're showing you can do all that you want, but here's the reality. You've got issues with different wordings, different issues like that.
So whatever the cause is, it has resulted in a different word which has a different meaning. And that's the crux of it.
Yeah.
Vowel differences.
And what I liked about what you did
Mm,
is you actually set the argument up. You set it up by saying, here's the standard that Allah gives.
yeah.
So there's the standard. It's all been preserved word for word. And you then
Mm,
show, there's different wording.
yeah.
So, and it's end of story, innit?
Yeah, yeah, and
So,
that's
yeah.
it. That's the problem when you make such, and I like Jason's word he used the other night, bold claims.
Yeah.
If you're going
Yeah.
to make such bold claims, you have got to honour them, and it does put you
Yeah.
under the
Yeah.
fire.
Yeah.
Don't make bold claims, Allah. Is all I'd say because
We don't make that claim.
no,
The Bible says the word of God is preserved, but it doesn't, there's nowhere where it says a scribe is going to be divine.
yeah,
It never says that.
and it's going to be free from error.
It's going to be free from copyist error. It will be preserved, but it's in all the manuscripts, not just in one
Yeah,
absolute perfect or 7 different ways or 10
yeah,
different ways. So they've set themselves such a bar so high,
yes,
it's impossible to bear the weight of it when
mm,
Ray is showing you word for word. There are different wordings that mean different things,
yeah,
not dialect like
mm,
Liverpudlian and Mancunian. No, this is
mm,
different words.
yeah, and of course, if Allah is saying it's perfect, if it's from Allah, how can we have these differences when they're clearly proven?
Mm, mm,
It really starts to beg the question,
mm,
you
mm.
know, is the Quran truly from Allah? And that's really where we're going with this because um, if God says that He's going to perfect His word,
Yeah, yeah,
then as God, if He's the true God of the universe, the creator of all things, then He's not going to have any problem ensuring that His word is perfected. If it's
yeah.
so, that's where we're saying
But
it's a bit of a disconnect here, isn't it?
I think like in the Bible it does say
Mm,
God's words preserved. But when they say when it talks about Allah,
mm,
they've gone and thrown in
yeah.
to back up this claim by Allah, the Aruf and the Quran, saying that the actual oral tradition, the actual copies, are divine,
Mm,
are
yeah.
error free, and you just shown like even a slip of the word, slip of a diacritical mark
Mark, yeah.
will change a word,
Mm,
and they have done that. We're not saying that. We're saying, yeah, God preserves His word, but in a way, providentially, that is there's so many copies that we
mm,
have the word of God there. But there are
yeah.
mistakes and textual variants in manuscripts, but it has been preserved. We just
Mm,
got to look at the textual variant. We're happy with the textual variant, but they have given themselves such a high bar.
mm,
They have textual variants,
yeah.
but they've tried to reason that away.
Yeah. Try and kind of put it under the carpet, hide it. Because the reality is, it then means it goes against what Allah is saying. And just to add to that, now, I don't know if this is true in terms of across the board Islamic world,
Mm,
but I know that when you had a discussion with Yemeni,
mm,
one of these Muslims that does debates and streams of his own, he put the case that when, and this is a little bit of an interesting challenge, I thought, for something for Muhammad, is
mm.
that when he received that old edition directly, the word from God, he received all the different recitations, all the
Yeah,
different
yeah,
diacritical.
but the thing is, there's nothing in the Quran
Mm,
nor in the Hadith
yeah,
that shows him actually
yeah,
teaching these Aruf, these dialects.
good point.
There's nothing to show you that he sat down with say Abu Bakr
Yeah,
and said, right, this is one pronunciation, this is the second
very
pronunciation,
good point.
this is the third, and then here are the Qurats. This is how you can mix it.
Mm,
There's nothing like that.
so it's a bit of,
There's only one example
yeah,
where
good point.
there's a hadith where
Mm,
one companion says is angry with another companion because they're pronouncing it different.
mm,
And he go to Muhammad and said, he's pronouncing it this way and he's pronouncing it that way.
mm,
And so the Muslims will say, there you are, there's a Quran,
yeah,
right? But it's but when they're pronouncing it this way and that way, guess what? They're talking about the Quraysh language.
mm,
They're not talking about two different dialects. They're
Yeah,
talking about
yeah.
the Quraysh
Saying
language,
Quraysh language,
and
yeah.
that is the only example they've got. They don't have any other
Right.
anything to show them that Muhammad sat down and did the 7 ways of recitation or the 10 Quran. They don't have anything.
Mm. And this is where it gets interesting because, like what Yemeni was saying, which I think is a bit interesting, and it's something you've got to be very, very wary of. Is he said, "Well, we have got all the documentation and so on and so on and so on." And he's right; he's got lots of documentation. But there's the problem with this. This is documentation that had been written way after Muhammad
Mm,
to
mm,
then put the claim, because if something is 400 years, 500 years later after Muhammad, it's not the definitive, authoritative explanation. It's a claim that they understand what took place. So, unless you can get right in the time of Muhammad and get the evidence of the earliest manuscripts around there and any other kind of documentation, like it said in the Hadith, which unfortunately they don't have any Hadiths that far back, do they? There's a big gap from
mm,
when the compilation of Hadiths appeared, and
mm,
certainly the Quran itself was a little bit late to some degree, but the very more importantly, the earliest Quran, like Jason mentioned, has no detail about this methodology and that Muhammad did receive
mm, mm,
all the different variances, if you like, of pronunciation, and he resolved them and he passed those all on him through himself.
mm,
That is purely a claim. There's absolutely zero evidence on
mm,
to
mm.
prove that. But yes, there's documentation of people writing that. But of course, people can write post events
Yeah,
and say this is
yeah,
history.
yeah.
But how do you validate it? How do you verify that it's true?
Well, in the scholarly world,
Yeah.
these hadiths, these stories about Muhammad,
Mm.
20% are mainly Muslim scholars and
Yeah.
far left scholars, and they say that you can use these hadith, they're accurate, they have a chain of narration going back. You
Mm.
got 20% of scholars who are what they call revisionist, who think
Yeah.
they're a complete waste of time, they were invented politically,
Mm.
right? But 60% of the scholars in the world today regard the hadiths as not historical, but
Mm.
they still use them just to be nice to the Muslims. But
Right.
it's categorically stated they do not think they are historical.
Yeah.
So that means 80% of the scholars, the revisionists, and the 60% do not regard those hadiths as history.
Got
They
it.
see them as political inventions.
Yeah.
And an example is Bukhari.
Mm.
He had 600,000 stories of Muhammad,
Right.
and he only chose 7,000 in his book, which shows you that there was thousands invented.
So how many did you have in total to begin with?
He had altogether, some say 1,000,000, but
Million. Right.
but
Yeah.
others say 600,000.
Oh,
So
600,000.
so
Got
you
it.
go
Got
for
it.
600,000 stories of Muhammad, and he's saying that there's only 7,000 that were accurate about Muhammad. But that tells you that
Which is
hun-
roughly 12%. That's all it is.
that tells you that hundreds of thousands were invented.
Mm.
And most scholars, 80% of scholars, regard these hadiths as not historical. They're invented politically
Yeah.
to give kudos to whatever caliphs
That's
around.
a very, very interesting point. And certainly what's relative or relevant to that here is using that information as something as a source
Yeah,
to prove is very, very questionable because you can't trace it all the way back.
mm,
But most importantly, is part of all this history is that we've got all these gaps, we've got these delayed or late entry of documentation to support the Quran, which is then under serious question. And certainly, like you say, it cannot be used as authentic, authoritative material because it came way too late. It's not how
mm,
critical examination of documentation works. If you're going to produce or
mm,
prove that a book is true, you first have to know when was it written, when was it first compiled, and what is it talking about. The Bible talks about history, that event that
mm.
happened. We've got archaeological evidence, etc. So we can compare that to the age of the documents we found, and we have found like in the second century for the New Testament, a lot of details of manuscripts relating to that New Testament, which is a very recent time.
Can I just have one quick thing, please?
Yes. Good.
Is when you look at that chain of narration, when you look at the original dates of some of these guys,
Yeah.
when they say this is a chain narration, you'll find the dates of the people suddenly change. In other words, they
Right.
make the people like last that this person lived 130 years or 120
Yeah.
years,
Yeah.
and so the original date he lived to about 60,
Right.
but in the chain of narration the guy lived to about 110 or something.
Right.
In order to make the chain of narration fit,
Mm.
so they're doing that all the time in
Oh,
the
wow.
generation.
Yeah.
So they try to make it make sense, you know.
So anyway, back to
So, but that's important.
food
It's
for thought.
important they're trying to prove the
Yeah.
Quran that it's original and the recitation, and they're saying they can use these hadith stories and trace it back and show that oral tradition is in those stories.
Yeah.
And we're saying that the history is not very reliable.
No, indeed. Very good point. So, vowels. Surah 1, verse 4. Owner of the day in the Hafs. The washes, king of the day. Now, you could argue owner, king, but they are very different words.
Yeah.
And an owner can be a king, but it can also not be a king. So it's not
Clear, is it?
No,
It's like a
definitely not.
shopkeeper, isn't it?
And here's a point here. If it was a king, I don't know about you, but whatever you call a king an owner, I'd call a king a king. You know, a king is a very important title.
Yeah. You would
It's
call
not-
them a king, wouldn't
Yeah,
you?
you wouldn't undermine his position. It's just call him an owner.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's not like the owner of the farm around the corner. He's the king.
Yeah.
Hello. 2 verse 9. They deceive. In wash, they seek to deceive. So one is past tense, and the other is to yet to be deceived. So clearly different. 2 verse 10. They lie. 2 in the wash is 2 verse 9. They were lied to. They lie. They were lied to. Contextually similar, I agree, but it's not the same. It's not the same. In terms of translating, having the word, that's not a pronunciation difference. That's a clearly different way that the structure of the sentence is put together. Let's think of another one here.
Excuse me.
Okay, this is a good one. This is one I know familiar with. It's 3.
Excuse me.
That's all right. 3 verse 146. In the house, and many a prophet fought. In 3146 in the wash, in the house, or the wash, I should say, it's and many a prophet was killed.
Massive difference. I think.
Fought, killed. There's no way around that. It's impossible to say that's the same pronunciation, same word, different pronunciation, whatever, different dialect. Fought and killed is completely different. If I fought in a battle, I'd like to think that I'm not necessarily killed just by fighting in a battle. That's not the same at all. It's just mind blowing, really. I'm not sure what the difference is there. So anyway, we'll stop there in terms of those differences. So you can see we are quoting, and this is part of 4,000 variances. We're just giving you a very small sample, clearly showing you, and we'll put all this in the description, the references of the verses with the differences, so you can see for yourself. Look it up. Don't take our word for it. Get a Quran. Certainly, one of the things I would do for those who are reaching out to Muslims is get the Qurans. I know I saw this once in Speaker's Corner, where you literally just get the 2 Qurans in your hand, show them, and get them somebody who can read Arabic. Get them to say, what does that say? Translate that to English. Tell me what it says. Then you get the other Quran, get them to read the same verse and then to translate that for me. Fought, killed is what he's going to say on that verse. And then you've got to simply ask him, do you agree that fought and kill is not the same word and it has a very different meaning? Unless he's going to be incredibly dishonest. Not that it matters too much, because if you record it, at least you get the evidence. At least you're showing him. Hopefully he will be honest as well and say, yes, that's different. Well, here's the problem with that. These are two recognized Qurans. The Wash and the Hafs, there is no dispute on planet Earth in the Islamic community, scholarly community specifically, especially, that they would ever agree that the Wash or the Hafs is not a Quran. They're Qurans found in different areas. Of course, we can get versions of them. We can get the Wash and Hafs, which a lot of people have done in the UK, so you don't have to go to those countries to get your copy. And you can get the Arabic. You can also do this online. You can go to Quran.com and there's Quran X. So, coughing a bit here. I'm struggling a bit. And you look at that and you can go in there and you can then look at the Wash of the Hafs. You get the versions. You can look at the Arabic and you can then see the translated English. It's there. The sources, the resources are there for you to check and validate what we're saying. Please, please do not take our word for it. Do check the sources and you will find the differences we're talking about. So we have, as I say, we have seen all these differences and between two Qurans. Of course, there are many other Qurans and there are many other differences. There is a book called The Readings and Rhythm of the Uthman Manuscript. Highly recommend that because this will go into a lot more detail about all the variances and differences and how they came about. So I would highly recommend reading that. So it displays the differences, it underlines the differences. It really does make it very easy for the reader to see the differences in the margin. It will highlight where those differences are. And I said there's over 4,000. I was going to show an example of it. Maybe I can by just showing you here. Do it like this. It's in my phone. I don't know if you can see that. On the very right or your left, you're seeing those red and black marks, the differences. It's highlighted, taking all those differences, showing them one by one. So it's really, really clear. Great amount of work has been done to show you this. And this was when the red coded differences of the red ones that were highlighted there were counted. There were found 1,354 accepted differences between the Hafs and Wash versions alone. Just between the Wash and Hafs. Of course, there are 7 different other types of Qurans. And within those 7 different Qurans, it doesn't stop there, is the fact that there are, again, not just those 7 Qurans, because I said that we came up with 31 plus different Qurans, which means when you look at them word for word, you will see Arabic differences in all of those 31. Jay Smith took them to the Speaker's Corner a few years back. So, if you wanted to do that research and get hold of as many copies you are, get hold of this book that and I will put it in the reference. Get that book. It highlights those differences and then go and check those different Qurans and you will see it for yourself. And the scholars are, for fundamentally to a very large extent, are agreeing with these differences. But as Jason put very nicely, the difference is this. The average Muslim would say it's purely a pronunciation dialectical difference. What we're showing you, and they'll say over roughly 4,000 of them, certainly between the Hafs and Wash alone is 1,354, that these differences produce different words which have different meanings. So does the Quran have differences? What would you say, Jason, to that?
Well, I think you've shown categorically, and there's multiple examples that you could have shown to show that there are different wordings and even different sentence structures. And then when you went into the history, there are different Qurans in terms of chapters in the manuscript tradition. So there are differences, but they try to get around it by saying it's just dialect. But And this book that you referred to, they've done the research there. You've mentioned quite a few scholars, and some of them are not on our side. Some of them are just
That's right.
trying to be objective. But it's an impossible argument that they're making. And I think it's not only impossible, it's irrational.
Yeah.
And I think any rational person who actually thinks about it, there can never be an inherent copy, a copying. In other words, there can never be perfect copies of the copies of the copies, whether orally or whether manuscript. And the reason being, humans make mistakes.
Hmm.
So they can never, it's an irrational argument. Because they're saying that humans are going to be perfect in making perfect copies,
Yeah.
perfect memory and perfect copying. Well, that's irrational
Yeah.
because that's never happened ever in the world.
No.
The only way you can have a perfect copy is if God, the Holy Spirit, guides the person to
Yes.
write every word. But when it comes to the copying, it can never be perfect unless God is actually sat there with a scribe saying, making sure it's not possible. So it's an impossibility and it's irrational. And the way they get around it is all this mumbo jumbo about the Arus, the Quran that you've had to unpack. But the reality is we just look at simple word study
Yeah.
of the Hafs and Quran, the Hafs and the Wash. That's
Yeah.
just two simple word studies, highlights that this is just nonsense.
And I do love that point I want to just bring up that you mentioned there about God in this, because the fact that it's Allah who's saying it's perfected. So you would like to assume, therefore, if that's correct, that Allah is involved in the preservation of the Quran, the whole
Yeah,
process
yeah,
of the
yeah, yeah.
transmission and the recitation, the recordings, the readings, the transmissions of the Quran. And if he was involved, would you see these errors?
No,
No.
you wouldn't. No.
So if Allah is
Yeah,
involved,
yeah,
and therefore you wouldn't see those errors, what does it mean if there are errors?
yeah, yeah, and you don't see in them in any of the ancient stories or tradition
Yeah.
that Gabriel sat down with Uthman, Gabriel sat down with Wash, Gabriel sat down with
Yeah.
um, Tabari or
Yeah.
whatever. He sat down and watched everyone making the copies. We don't see that.
No,
But
no.
even if we granted that,
Yeah, even if.
it still don't get you there.
No, we still end up with this mess.
It's a good point. You're still buried
Yeah,
by
yeah.
the fact that what we just shown. And it's a lot worse than what Ray's showing. Ray's being kind. If we actually went through it for a few hours, we could show you major, major, major differences that you won't
Yeah.
believe. And if we showed you the Sana manuscript under ultraviolet light and all the research that's done, you'd be shocked. But just showing a few examples shows you that this theory. So it's irrational and it's impossible. And even if we grant you angels sat down for every manuscript and every oral tradition being passed on, you're still buried by the fact that there are different words.
Yeah. Fantastic point, indeed. Thank you, Jason. So remember, I did mention about Sabhi al Sali, and I will still continually pronounce that incorrectly. So apologies, I can't pronounce these names. Good luck to those who can. He kind of summarizes nicely. So I'll just give you these 7 differences that he basically summarized. And this was his conclusion after all this research. As you say, we're going to provide the references so you can look at his scholarly
I
work.
look forward to it.
Yeah, I would definitely send it to you. Differences in grammatical indicators. Differences in consonants. Differences in nouns as to whether they are singular, dual, plural, masculine, or feminine. It gets interesting, doesn't it? How can you have the same word if it uses a different noun, whether it's singular or like I and we, or male or female? Maybe today you would be confused what male and female is, but back in the day, you would a male's a male, a female's a male, a female. That's not the same. We and I is not the same. Differences in which there's a substitution of one word for another. That's big. That for me is big, isn't it?
Mm,
Taking a word and replacing it with another word which
mm.
has a different meaning. That's a little bit of skullduggery. That doesn't sound preservation to me. That sounds a little bit of oogie poogie going on there. Difference is due to a reversal of word order in expression. I think we had a couple of examples, didn't we? Because of the word order that it's written, it changes the way that the meaning of that sentence is expressed. So you, of course, if I say I'm going to the shops, I do want to make sure that when I translate that and we get copies of that word, it always ends up I went to the shop, not the shop and I went to somewhere, or whatever. You keep changing the order. What happens? It just completely changes the sentence. Now you can make some slight changes. There could be errors or slight changes in the sentence, and that would, as long as it prevails the same meaning. But we're talking about differences where that word order really makes a significant difference in the meaning. And we did show some examples earlier. Differences due to small additions or deletion in accordance to the custom of the Arabs. Now this is really interesting. Somebody at the door there. Is deletions especially. Now, like Jason alluded to that when he was saying about was it Birmingham or the Sanyu manuscript or something?
What's that?
Where you did ultraviolet light.
Ultraviolet light is the Sanyu manuscript.
Sanyu manuscript. Yeah. So again, we saw that, and I quoted one earlier where you saw the erasions of words being erased. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? And then lastly, the difference is due to dialectical peculiarities. And I like that word peculiarities because we're not talking about a simple dialectical difference which doesn't change the word or meaning. The peculiarity in that the difference of the way that a dialect change has been made has impacted the word and meaning. And we don't know why. That's why it's called peculiar, because it's just, why did that happen? Is it just some scribal error? What's the reason behind it? But at the end of the day, it caused another major word meaning difference. Now I've got more and more cases simply which I'll provide as document information, but they are just continually more and more variances put together. And this is a bit I just want to mention too. So a little bit of research I did. So there's apparently a 6-book volume encyclopedia which records all known variances. It is entitled, and again, apologies for my pronunciation, Majum al-Quran 8 ad, oh my word, Quran ya Mal Madunadinuk. I'm completely butchering this, apologies. Fi Kurasant al Akbar al Korevi. Let me put this in English, and I'll put this in a reference anyway, so you can look up and find this. Maybe you can buy it online if you're that keen. It's the encyclopedia of the Quranic readings with the introduction of readings and famous readers. So it's going back, showing you, like I said earlier, that all those readers that I mentioned, those names, was then the compilers that were then given to Hafs, Wash, Al-Juri, etc., which were then the companions or whatever that were then the ones that then transmitted that particular Quran to the masses. And this is going back to those original sources of those readings and showing you from source. Why is that important? Because it's the honesty, authenticity of those differences. And the reason why I say that is, if we see a very late difference, we could say, well, somehow after God has done everything, Allah's done everything, perfected it, someone has come on later and then sabotaged it. That would be a case. But because this is going back to the absolute original source of the readings and transmissions, where we're seeing these errors clearly documented in, I don't know if you see, that's 4 massive, 6 even, massive books, which is that full set of encyclopedia showing those differences. And I don't know about you, Jason, 6 thick books full of differences. It sounds to me like it's quite a few.
Yeah, I think all this scholarship's hidden from Muslims.
Yeah.
Muslims are not don't know much about this, you know. And that's why it was a shock when Yasser Qadi, who was a Muslim scholar, admitted that there's holes in this
Yeah, holes in the narrative.
Islamic narrative of a perfectly preserved Quran.
Yeah.
And he's a Muslim scholar, and he shook the Muslim world because
Mm.
he was admitting. But most Muslims are not aware of
Yeah.
this kind of scholarship, even within their own camp. Even Orthodox Muslims from Shia and Sunni, you can go back to ancient times, and they acknowledged there were different Qurans, and they weren't
Yeah.
talking about different readings.
Mm.
They were acknowledging there were proper textual variants.
Yeah.
Tabari lists them as well. Tabari acknowledged he was one of their greatest scholars, Sunni, and he acknowledged that there were different Qurans, and he said there's a verse, a word different here than here, and that was nothing to do with readings. That was to acknowledge the textual variants. So Muslims are not aware of their own scholars, and the fact that some of them were honest and actually said, you know, there are different Qurans.
So here's an interesting question. How many, as a percentage, would you say all the words in the Quran, if you looked at every single version, Hafs, Wash, and what I mean by versions, all these different recitations, readings, and transmissions, just in case anybody wants to get anal but can't use the word version, all those different cases of those Qurans, taking every single one together and comparing them all side by side, where if one of them is different to the other 6, 7, or whatever it may be, in this case we've got 30 odd Qurans, and we saw differences in just one difference in any one of those books compared to the rest, how many words of the whole Quran as a percentage do you think has a variance?
Hundreds of thousands, millions.
As a percentage.
Oh, as a percentage.
So let's say there were 10 million words in the whole of Quran. Guess how many as a percentage of those words has a variance somewhere?
80%.
Great guess. That's a great guess. Sure you're not reading right now, you're not.
No, I'm not reading. I'm just guessing. What is it?
100%.
100%.
Every single
Wow, that's
word.
amazing, bro.
Yeah. That you can only find in encyclopedia. Why is that?
100%.
Every single word.
Wow, that's amazing.
Well, almost. Maybe 99.9. But it's way up there. It's close.
Wow, that's a complete turnaround from
The
Muslim apologists who'll say it's 100% preserved, word for word, and yet we're talking, let's say 99%, just to be kind.
Yeah.
Textual variance in percentage. That's amazing.
Certainly, if you look just between Hafs and Wash, it's nowhere near
It's just
that
like
percentage.
over 1,000.
Because there are 30 plus
But
Qurans.
the 30 odd Qurans, it comes up to 90%.
Yeah. So in other words,
Over 90%.
less than 1% of the Quran has every single Quran with the exact same word.
That's amazing, bro. That's absolutely astounding.
And it's only found, in terms of a compilation, in terms of research, is this encyclopedia, which is the reason why I wanted to mention it. Because this encyclopedia has all, I say all, I don't know if it has all, to be honest, but it certainly has a very large number of all the known Qurans, and it's making those comparisons. It provides in the margin exactly based on the way that it provides that reading. I think if it's red, it's Wash, and if it's black, it's Hafs. If it's green, it's this. Whichever way it does it, number of different kind of styles to use to highlight the source of the difference. And it's taken so many Qurans, making all those variances, and then simply highlighting them in the margins. And so the only way there's only two ways you could do that. Is either go to this encyclopedia set. I guess it's going to cost maybe a few bob to pay for that set, or you get hold of 12, 20 Qurans, whatever number you can, open it up and start going through one by one, verse by verse, looking at all the differences. I don't know about you, but I'd like to go to the guy who's done that work for me already. And of course, you can take sample sets. The reason why that's important is it shows you the absolute significance of these differences. And secondly, which is the most key part of this, that there are differences. No one after this study is ever going to say there is such a thing as a perfect Quran perfectly preserved, word for word, dot for dot. It's
mm,
absolutely not true.
mm,
The evidence is there, going back to the sources. These are even academic work done by Islamic scholars.
mm,
It's their scholarly work. But you only if you dig this deep, take away the veil of the deception
mm,
of some known scholars, and I know there isn't differences, or it's only pronunciation. The only way, it's a bit like a crime scene. People say, "Well, no, nobody did it," and we come up with all these answers. He was in McDonald's at the time. He couldn't have shot the person. He was there, but then you manage to get to the source of the event, and you have his DNA on the crime scene. He was there. This is what this is like. This is like the DNA of the differences
mm,
from the very furthest back, the readings by the scholars, the companions to the transmitters, the wash, half jury, etc., etc., etc. No scholar is going to deny that's their sources. We are going to give you all those references to prove and substantiate that we are talking about all that scholarly work. And that's where you will see all these differences. And the ones that we were given clearly show these differences are not just diacritical differences or pronunciation differences. They are differences in words that have different meanings. You, I, killed, fought, etc., etc. They are just a very, very small number of the total differences. If Allah, and this is the critical bit, says that he has perfected his Quran, it therefore cannot have error. It cannot have differences because a difference is an error because both words can't be both correct. It's one or the other because they're not a
mm,
variance in terms of pronunciation. It to me means that Allah is not behind the Quran.
mm,
If it was Allah, there wouldn't have been these differences. The reason why I'm even going down that road to suggest that is because it doesn't stop there. When we look at the Quran, it makes lots of additional claims. It claims that it is in line with the previous prophets. It says that it's no contradictions. It's fully explained in detail. The list goes on. It even brings up history, but then contradicts the history that it's referring to. It even says that the Torah and Injil are the revelation of Allah. And of course, Allah preserves its word. 280 says, don't take part of it, take the whole of it. Yet when we look at the Torah and Injil, it doesn't agree with the Quran. So this is like the tip of the iceberg of differences that basically put the case, is the Quran really from God? With these kind of differences and these other weeks that we're going to show other types of issues, I would say that's definitely under
mm,
debate. Certainly as Christians, we're not convinced that the
mm,
Quran is from God. I'm not saying where it's from, who's to say, but what I am saying is please do your research. We're going to give you the references. This will be a very good starting point to see that what all these claims were that you've been told by your imams and scholars or whatever simply isn't true.
mm.
That's pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed it. Any comments? Any lasting comments?
No, I think you've done a good job, a thorough job of the topic, bro. I'm excited to look at one or two of those references,
Sure.
especially that encyclopedia.
Mm.
And I was quite shocked. I didn't know that from that book about nearly every verse has
Almost.
got a textual
Yeah.
a variant. That's absolutely amazing.
So, yeah.
Yeah, amazing, absolutely amazing. So thank you very much, man.
You're welcome, and thanks for joining. Thanks for your input. I hope you've enjoyed it, all those who are watching. And certainly you, and I want to make this very clear to you, Muslims out there, we have a love for you. This is not an attack on you. This is not
Yeah,
a personal thing. This is just, as genuine
yeah,
Bereans of
yeah,
the word, we want to show where things are simply aren't true. When you're being deceived on a claim
yeah,
that is clearly through research proven to be not true, we want to share you with that. Because like Jason said earlier, I bet you many Muslims, even Muslims that are watching this, probably didn't know that these variances existed, especially to the level that they do or the significance that they hold, that it's not just a variance in pronunciation, it is real word meaning differences.
Yeah, and we're not trying to win an argument. We just want you to come to know the Lord as your Savior. When we die, that's not the end. There's a heaven and a hell, and we want you to come. And the only way is believing on the Lord Jesus Christ. And
Indeed.
I hope that you see that what Ray did is he went to your scholarship first, your Quran, looked at what the Quran said, looked at what your scholars said, and then in a very gracious way, he just looked at the scholarship, and that's all we're doing. We're not here to mock you. We're not here to pull you down. We just really want you to come to know the Lord, because at the end of the day, in humanity, we have to treat each other with love, and we just pray that you come to know the Lord as your Savior.
So before we just finish, we got a couple of comments. I did get a chance to check. So anyway, welcome, man, for watching. Annie, a very good friend of mine in the US. Hope you're well. He's a great Christian, great ambassador for the faith. Muhammadan or something. According to Islam's own definition of preservation, the Quran is perfectly preserved. That's right. This is the problem. According to Islam's own definition, it's perfectly preserved. But if we see clearly the evidence is that it isn't, you've got a bit of a challenge there. What does that tell you? If Allah is saying it's perfectly preserved, and he says that in the Quran, and you clearly see that it isn't, and there's the evidence, your sources, Islamic sources, then you've really got to say to yourself, how is that possible? And I've come to my conclusion. My conclusion is I don't believe the Quran is from Allah. That's why I can only draw that conclusion. And that's because it's more to it than that. It's not just the fact that we have differences, which goes against what even Allah is claiming, because I don't see how Allah could fail to perfect his word if he's saying it is perfected, as well as the fact that we have even more issues when we start looking at what the Quran actually says and its teachings and the claims it makes from that perspective, because then it gets even more interesting. That's for another week. That's for another time. Thanks for the comments anyway. I thought we'd just quickly address them before we go. And for those who are watching, have a great evening. Have a great day depending where you are in the world. Until the next time, God bless. Until next time, goodbye.